Hello. On this episode of the Inventive Marketing Club, I'm going to be taking a look at what is AI. This is part one of a two-part series on using AI in business. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what AI is, or large language models are, and how they work. So let's dive straight in. Now, I've actually run this presentation before. I've done a few training sessions, and in one of those training sessions, there was a guy called Dan Andrews from Scribbly Sense. And one of the things he does is he attends presentations, sometimes on his own behalf or sometimes on behalf of the company. And then what he likes to do to help remember them is illustrate them out. So he illustrates out the core topics. So that's exactly what he did to one of mine. He came along and has done this amazing drawing, which you can see on the screen, which basically takes us through the key areas that I discussed. It was actually really interesting to see whether I've sort of captured all the key topics by looking at this, and I've included it because I think it gives you a really good overview of this particular presentation. So if you ever want a quick idea on what AI is, you can actually just look at this screen. But I highly recommend you go and check out scribblysense.com if you're interested in getting one of these done for your own presentation. Then definitely worth getting in touch with Andrew. He's a lovely chap and he does some great illustrations. But let's move on. So I'm just going to bring up this warning that we've got a bit of AI weirdness ahead, just to set the scene. And I will say that actually, I'm mostly going to be focusing on text-based AI and large language models. However, they don't look very interesting. So I'm going to start by showing you a few pics generated in various different AI style generators. So this is the first one I grabbed online, and when I was doing research for this particular presentation, I went online and you search for weird things AI has generated, and this came up, but it's actually pretty cool. The prompt, if you will, and we'll come more onto what that means later, for this particular image is a still of Homer Simpson in The Godfather. And so what the AI has done is take the sort of vast corpus of knowledge or visual knowledge that it has about what has been tagged as Homer Simpson and The Godfather and mashed them together. And it's done a pretty good job, I'd say, looking at the two here. And it's presented two different images of Homer Simpson looking rather stern in a suit. And it's done it in a lifelike way. So it's not taken the cartoon style of The Simpsons, but it's actually tried to make it a bit more realistic, as if this is what Homer would look like in real life. The next one here, I can't actually remember the generation system I used for this particular one. I know the previous one was a sort of process called DALL-E, or an AI called DALL-E, which is part of OpenAI. I can't remember what this one used, but we actually used, I generated these robots for our experimental AI play, which I'll tell you more about at the end of this presentation. And what I love about it is the sort of quality, really, of some of these the generated images was absolutely amazing. Now, these are just roughly cut out. They were actually on blue backgrounds. But the quality is actually amazing in terms of what it comes out with. And I'll give you another example of exceptional quality. This particular one here, and I know the prompt for this because I did it for this, created it for this particular presentation. I went into OpenAI's DALL-E, and I asked it to create an image of Ben Kinnaird from Rather Inventive eating ice cream. Now, it came back saying it isn't able to do that. It's got a restriction where it's not allowed to create images of real people, certainly not people who aren't well known, but not real people, and basically create fake images of them. So what it did is it came back and said, well, here's a tech entrepreneur eating ice cream. Now, I'll take tech entrepreneur. Now, what I'll also take is, well, I'm pretty well ripped in that image, if that's meant to be. I've got a good head of hair, which sadly is not what I've got anymore. And hey, what? I've got 2 Apple Watches. How tech am I? So what I love about this image is it's created a random person, which it believes is a tech entrepreneur. So it's looking through all these images and sort of basically pulling this together. And looking at the typical things that a tech entrepreneur might have. So they might actually exercise, they might have lots of gadgets around them, Apple computers and so on, but the quality is actually pretty good. Now, if you were to study this image, it's a little bit fuzzy around the edges, but if you needed something for blog article or just a quick image to post on social, it does the job really well. So again, this was made in OpenAI's DALL-E. And then we've got some weirdness, basically. This is the sort of prompt for this is Will Smith eating spaghetti or pasta. And this was made in a system called Model Scope, which I've played with, and it comes out with some weird stuff, including this. And this is actually a sequence of, or a series of different videos that have been put together. What's strange about it, let me rerun it actually. What's strange about it is that the AI doesn't seem to understand the concept of things going into people's mouths. So it's really struggling with that, and it looks quite bizarre. And it's almost like actually a sequence of still images being morphed together into a video. So it does look pretty weird, but you can see that it's starting to get better. Let me show you another one. So this particular one is generated using, actually, I'm not sure of the system it's used to generate, but it's a lot more advanced. The quality is a lot better. And while everything looks weird and bizarre, which is as designed, it's prompted to be that way, the quality is, well, it's much more realistic. And you can imagine that this sort of thing will, over time, be sort of improved, and the quality will be improved, and the realism of the characters, especially people. People are very hard for AIs to generate. They will be a lot better as well. But for some people who haven't seen this sort of thing before, it's actually pretty amazing or bizarre, depending on how you look at it. Let me move on. So that's just sort of sets the weirdness scene. Let's have a look at what is an AI chatbot, because that's what people have been thinking about when it comes to AI. It's just some kind of chatbot. Well, the core thing to remember is that AI, in this particular case, when we're looking at these, they aren't real artificial intelligence. They don't truly have a sense of self or have a sense of understanding. They aren't alive, if you will, and don't sort of fully comprehend. All they understand is the information that you put into them, and they are trying to then, through a series of replies, trying to make some sense of that. I'll come on to a little bit more about how this works in a minute, but essentially that's what it is. They aren't alive, but they do appear that way if you have been using them. The chat bit is just the easiest way to interact with AI. In previous iterations, people used APIs, application programming interfaces. So that allows you, in a code level, on a programming level, you can get your program to communicate with an AI and feed information back and forth. However, it's not very easy for us humans to do that. We like to converse. That's what we do. We either do it verbally or in text. So chat became a very good way of actually interacting with an AI to actually see what it can do and program it. But rather than me ramble on, what I've done is I've asked ChatGPT, and that was ChatGPT, sort of an older version, 3.5, to actually describe itself. So let's see what it says. So it says ChatGPT is an AI language model trained to generate human-like text-based on the input it receives. It uses deep learning algorithms to analyze and understand language patterns, enabling it to produce coherent and relevant responses to questions or prompts. ChatGPT can be used in a variety of applications, including natural language processing, language translation, and content creation. So let's just break that down a little bit. So what we're saying here is ChatGPT, or OpenAI, which is what most people are familiar with when it comes to AI, or although on the next slide I'll show you lots of other ones that people that other companies use or have made. What it's saying here is that the AI, the algorithm, the calculation, the program, if you will, has been trained. So it's been fed, it's had input of information of lots of text. So basically, it's been trained on the internet. It's been given lots of web pages to basically run through and convert all of that text into calculations. And those calculations will give a likelihood on the occurrence of different words, the likelihood of one word after the next, which I'm going to go to in a bit more detail in a couple of slides. And so that basically gives it the what becomes the model. The model is the algorithm. It's the calculation of all of that text and how that text works together. And so that helps give the AI, and I call it an understanding of our language. Now, the great thing about this is it's also been fed on different languages, so not just English, but different languages, and also programming languages, because they're just text, they're just another way of communicating. And that means that by using that model, not only can it broadly understand and interpret our language by what we've typed in to infer what we want, but it can then look at the best answer to that based on what other people have written and put out there. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but I'm going to come back to that. It's also saying at the bottom that it's got a variety of different applications, from natural language processing, which is basically looking at the way we talk and passing that into what we actually mean. So sort of breaking it down and saying, what do we mean from that? And content creation. And this is where the big explosion has come. And it's what I'm going to be looking at in part 2 of this sort of mini series, where we're going to look at how people can actually use it to create content for their website, for their marketing campaigns. Just a few other things. So ChatGPT, chat is the chat part of it. GPT is generative pre-trained transformer. And that just means it's pre-trained on content and it generates information. It's also called a large language model, which basically means it uses a lot of information that's been trained on. You might hear some people calling it an LLM or LLM. Let's move on to the companies who are in this space. I'm just going to move around my slides here, but in the middle, we've got OpenAI. Now, this is such a new area. I mean, OpenAI sort of broke into the populace last year, so about 12 months ago now. But AI and AI systems and algorithms have been in use for many, many years. I mean, it's decades, really. It's only now that we've really got the computing power to manage the ingest of all of this content and then calculate the output from it. So it's really only our modern computing power that has really brought us to where we are. And I can see that only accelerating. But OpenAI is sort of the one everyone knows. And they've got two systems. You've got DALL-E, which produces images. And that's spelled DALLE. And that produces some of the images that you've seen in the intro, like the one of the tech entrepreneur. And it also has ChatGPT, which is their text-based AI or algorithm, which allows you to chat with it. In their more recent version, version 4, which is a paid version of OpenAI, and I'll give some examples in our part 2, you can actually, they combine both together. So you can actually just ask it for a mixture of text and images. You can get it to interpret images in terms of what it's outputting. So OpenAI is one of those systems. It's one of the most well-known. And then I'll move over to Copilot from Microsoft. So obviously Microsoft is a very well-known company. And they've got this sort of brand called Copilot, which they have been working on for some time. But they are a large investor in OpenAI. So they're actually allowed to use a lot of the chat GPT technology in their Copilot system. And Copilot is basically a tool that sits within their different products. So Microsoft Word, through to GitHub, and Excel. And basically Copilot sits within each of those and is then much more specific to that domain. So if you need help with writing, in Word, then Copilot's going to help you do that. If you need help with coming up with sifting through the data in your Excel spreadsheet, Copilot's going to do that. If you're using GitHub, then Copilot's going to help you sift through the code on there. So Copilot is their sort of brand of AI and how people use it, but it's really using the sort of OpenAI technology in the back end, plus their own as well. Going to the other side, we've got Google. Google has been developing AI for a long time, and the brand they came out with that people could actually play with is Bard. And that is kind of linked in with their search system. And then we've also got something that's pretty new. I don't think it's been released yet, but we've got Gemini. So this is Google's new version of Bard, effectively, or DeepMind, which I believe is their general, their original name for the AI. So we've got Gemini, which is a new version, which is meant to be a lot better than OpenAI ChatGPT or DALL-E systems, and there's a nice little video online showing how it works. But again, it's not out yet, so we've got to take all these things with a pinch of salt. And as I said, this is a really fast growing and changing system. So by the time I've recorded this and we're a couple of months down the line, things probably will have changed. But essentially, these are the main players at the moment. What else we got on here? So Meta, I'm not sure what Meta system is called, but I know they're playing with something. I haven't really delved into their AI systems, so I just want to let you know that Meta are in the game as well, but I haven't played with any of their systems. However, I have played with Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, and these are more visual-based AI systems where they can create very good AI images. Midjourney is it's not really one I use just because it runs through Discord, and Discord is just not a system that I use much of, but a lot of people like it. It seems to be a really good system. And then Stable Diffusion is just another system which can generate images as well. So there's a mix here of different players, different companies that are working in the AI space, whether it's either image generation or text generation. Of course, there are lots of other systems that can create video as well. We've seen a few examples of that, or even music or sound effects. But don't have time to dive into all of those. But I'm just going to focus on OpenAI because that's the most interesting one for the moment. Oh, I will add that in my sort of testing of these, Google Bard has been quite good from a research perspective, because what it will do is pull out web articles and actually give you citations. I believe ChatGPT is doing this a bit more now, but Bard was sort of first there. So if you actually want to get information and understand where it comes from, because you want to do some further reading, Google Bard's probably a good bet for that. But again, depends on your what you're using. If you're already using OpenAI, then ChatGPT could be the best way forward. And then their new version does actually interact with more live searches now. So what's fascinating is the speed with which this has grown. I mean, OpenAI got 1 million subscribers in 5 days. It took Netflix 3.5 years to get there. Netflix was considered quite a fast growing company. So it's just amazing how quickly this sort of thing is growing. And OpenAI, I mean, recently have been involved in a huge board change. The board kicked out Sam Altman, who was the main director the main CEO of OpenAI. They kicked him out. He was going to move over to Microsoft. Then the board changed their mind, came back on. He's changed the board. It's all crazy. And because it's moving so fast, there are some people who want to rein in AI because they're worried about what's going to happen in the future. And sort of part of me does have a worry that there is a chain of events where if not properly watched, we could have even AI systems as they are, if they're connected in the right way. If you've got ChatGPT connected to systems that can do physical things, turn things on or off, or even launch missiles, there is no reason why someone couldn't interact with an AI and ask it to do things on their behalf. And there have been many stories in the past about how people have, with the right conversation and the right prompting, have got AIs to come up with answers to their questions that seem quite strange and could lead to malicious use if they were connected to physical devices. So I definitely agree on the one hand that we should be thinking more carefully about it, but on the other hand, there are so many benefits to it, and I can see them in what I do in terms of business, in terms of removing some of the boring, laborious work we're doing. I'm going to look a bit more on the ethics side of it in part 2, and how it could affect creators and so on. But for now, it's just fascinating to see how this has grown, how it's something that has been bumbling along in the background, and then it's just with the right format and interaction with people, it's been something that has grown massively. Let's change speed a little bit and actually look at how a large language model, or LLM, works. Now, I broadly understand the concept, but I'm not a data scientist and I don't fully understand this. So I recommend, if you want a full and proper explanation, I recommend that you visit our link, which will be in the notes, to a website linked on what is ChatGPT doing and why does it work. And this is from a website called Wolfram Alpha. And it's a really detailed article that goes from quite simple concepts and then starts going into the detail, the maths, the science behind it. I must admit, I've read a lot of it, not all of it. It started getting to a point where I didn't fully understand it. However, if you want to know more, I definitely recommend reading it. But if you just want to know the basic concept, that's what I'm going to explain to you. So essentially, what an LLM has done is, first of all, they've taken a lot of text, and that's come from the internet. It's because there's loads of, I'm going to say, publicly available information on the internet. There is an issue as to whether these companies are allowed to take all of that content and then create new stuff from it. But for the moment, we don't know how that's going to unfold. So essentially what they've done is use the internet as a sort of big database of information. And it's going to be, and we're just looking at text for the moment. So it's going to be looking at how words fit together. You know, if you take a typical blog article, for example, you're going to be able to look through that, and once a computer ingests that, it can start to understand which words crop up at which probabilities and how often and how they're grouped. So we can start to pull all of this information in from lots of different websites and start to build up basically patterns. So how many times different words appear and what the probability of those words coming are next after another word is. So one thing I will point out is that these AI are not free in terms of cost and energy. It takes a massive amount of energy to crawl the internet in the first place and ingest that and perform the mathematics to work out all of the probabilities. That takes a lot of energy to begin with. But also, every single query, every question we type in, every request has to go to the cloud and be calculated, and that answer pulled back. That takes a little bit of energy as well. So it is worth thinking about that. You know, there are some potential impacts on carbon output if they're not using green sources of energy to run these systems. So it's something that really needs to be sorted out for the future, because otherwise, or these things to be made, the calculations to be performed more efficiently, so we're not using as much power. However, so they basically pull in all of this data, perform a process on it, which builds up a model, and this is basically looking at the various different percentages and probabilities of words that follow each other. And it's effectively looking at, when it's got a given input, what the output might be. And that's building up a model. It's basically an algorithm, a calculation. And what that allows it to do in its simplest sense is determine what the next best word is going to be. So if we look on the screen, we've got on the left-hand side, we've got a simple sentence to begin with. The best thing about AI is its ability to learn. And then it goes on, I've always liked the. The next line is, the best thing about AI is its ability to really come into your world and just. And it goes on, we've got other ones. The best thing about AI is its ability to examine, to do, to create. Now, each of those words, the model is able to look at the input, which is the first few words. The best thing about AI is its ability to, and then look at the next word that it has seen around the internet that's built up a, it's basically got a probability of what word comes next. Maybe the highest probability is learn, and then it's really, and then examine. So these are different words that could be used after the few words before it. And you can see in the graph, sorry, not the graph, well, I guess it's kind of graph. In the image on the right-hand side, we've got all the words and their different probability. So learn would be the most probable word to come after that particular sentence. But then also predict, slightly less probable, but not far off it. And then make, understand, do, be, solve, adapt, and so on. And you can see the probability of each of those words falling off. So they are basically, when it's looked through the internet, they are less and less likely to be seen. They're not as common when we're looking at that particular phrase. And it's not that the AI has seen that exact phrase, but it seems similar phrases. It's looking at similar meaning, and these are the words used. So what the LLM is able to do, what the model is able to do, is feed in our input and then basically predict the next word that goes after that, but do it on a mass scale. So it's actually able to predict the next word and then predict the next word and then predict the next word. So it actually builds up a paragraph and then multiple paragraphs and then a whole sort of ream of content that you've asked it to produce simply by looking at predicting what the next words are. Now, it does randomize this, because if it didn't randomize, it's always going to come up with the highest probable word. And that's just going to be boring. It's certainly not what we do in terms of language. We might pick different words. Different people would pick different words. So the AI is doing the same thing. If it randomizes it, so it doesn't just pick the most probable each time, it will randomize the probability or which words are most probable. So it picks up different words. So we can see, looking at our left-hand graphic, that's why we've got different words that come up. Its ability to learn, to examine, and so on. So that's essentially what it's doing. It's just predicting what the next word is. It's not quite as simple as that, but that's effectively what it's doing. So you can see it's not actually intelligent. It's just has a pattern, and it's just following those patterns with a little bit of randomness built in. This next graphic is, again, all of these graphics have been pulled from this Wolfram Alpha article, which I do recommend you at least reading the first half of it. We can see that we've got lots of different words on the screen, and they're in clusters. So we've got different clusters of words that are around different categories or different types of word groupings, from nouns, verbs, and so on. And so it can really start to understand not only what the types of words are, but also you can have different groupings as to what they actually mean. And this is the sort of thing you would see if you could slice open the AI model, almost like when you have a brain scan, you can see when people are doing things, different parts of the brain light up. You'd have different parts of the model lighting up as different inputs flow through it. It's similar in nature if you could visualize it. So it's quite fascinating to sort of see how it might actually build up like this. I'm just going to finish off now by talking about a little bit on the impact of business, because there's so many different things that these models can actually be used for. The first one I found particularly great in terms of marketing is just coming up with ideas. The human brain is actually really good at coming up with ideas, but in order to do so, you need to almost do lots of ingesting yourself, like in AI. The best way of coming up with ideas is to read a lot or watch a lot or do different things. So you're basically giving the brain a lot of input, and then it will do something similar to what the AI is doing. It'll find patterns, it will connect with problems it needs to solve, and you will have these thoughts just occurring to you, which become ideas. But sometimes we're time pressured and we can't do that. We've got too much on, or sometimes actually it's just good just to get some random ideas from other people. So I found AI to be, or ChatGPT in this particular case, to be great for actually just give me some ideas in this particular area. It's not coming up with anything unique, to be fair, generally. It's coming up with things that have been seen elsewhere, but it's giving some randomness to it. So it can be really useful for just coming up with some marketing ideas. You need some ideas to market your company and move it forward. Well, these can be a great way of pushing that forward, or coming up with ideas that you can then riff on, iterate on. The other thing that's quite good is generating text variations. Now, I find this really useful when it comes to ad copy, or maybe even social copy, where you've got an article or you've got a web page and you just want to pull out some of the key points from that. I'm not a copywriter. I don't enjoy doing that sort of thing, but sometimes I just need to get that done. So you can just copy and paste that into ChatGPT, and then maybe ask for different variations of a certain character length that you can then copy and paste into your ads or social. I will say it doesn't mean that you should just go with what ChatGPT comes back. In my part 2, we're going to have some warnings about that and things that you should definitely check its work. But it basically allows you to be an editor rather than starting off with that blank sheet of paper or that blank notepad where you just don't know where to go. It basically fires loads of things at you pretty quickly, and then it's much easier to go, no, that's not going to work, that's not going to work. Oh, I like that bit. Maybe we can bring these two things together, or that's perfect. So I find that great. Writing email replies, I know some people use it for that. I don't. Although, however, some of the people, when I've presented this, have mentioned that they've used it for writing emails that are maybe they find difficult to write. So they've asked ChatGPT to do that, to actually come up with a rough idea of how they should approach a difficult topic. Maybe it's firing a client, for example, or approaching a price increase. So ChatGPT can be a good way of doing that, just to give you some ideas to start with. I mean, we can do the same thing just by looking on the internet. There's plenty of people who've written about this sort of thing, but sometimes it's a little bit easier just to get some just general ideas that are very much relevant to the context you put in there. I'm just going to skip down the list here. I'm not going to read them all out. But a couple of that we've found it quite useful for is actually writing how-to guides. The great thing about writing how-to guides is that they're very specific about how they're going to work. So it might be a how-to guide on how to add a new image to WordPress, for example. Well, there isn't only one main way of doing that. You can easily check if it's going to be wrong. And what it does is just speed up the amount of time. Rather than having to write all that from scratch, it's going to write you a basic outline, which we can be embellish, or often I find cut back some of that embellishment that ChatGPT adds. The other thing you can get it to do is write code. I have only in testing, really. I've never used any code it's generated in practice, but I have. You can get it to write different bits of code, and in part 2, I'm going to show you how to do that. You can also get it to write a play, and that's exactly what we did for our 100th episode. As I've said many times, I'm no writer, but I've always wanted to do something a bit more creative on certainly for our 100th episode. So I thought it would be fun to get AI to actually write the script, and then for us to act it out and see how that works. So I'll just leave a little video of it playing here. But if you are interested in seeing the output of that, I definitely recommend you check out our 100th episode. We had a lot of clients and partners come on to do the voices, the narration, even the music. And I put everything together in Keynote. So it was a lot of work, but a lot of fun in terms of just doing something a little bit different. So I highly recommend you watch that if you're interested. We'll make sure it's linked in the notes. While this plays out, that's it for this part. In part 2 of AI, I'm going to talk about how you might use it in business and basically run you through some little examples of how it all works. Thanks for watching this episode of the Inventive Marketing Club. You can learn more, find great episodes, or join us at ratherinventive.com/club. Bye for now.